there that are looking at every photograph, and when you see the promo for Martians, did you know that there's people on Mars that are 8 to 10 inches tall?
Wow, that's interesting because there's been some expeditions down in South America where they have actually recovered very similar, 8 to 10 inch tall, really alien-looking bodies.
Yeah,
very strange.
Yeah, well, on Mars, photography taken by the Mars rover. Yep. There's incredible stuff, man. I mean, there's that face that's embedded in a rock on a hillside, and there's a little person waving at the rover.
I remember that one.
Waving at the rover, and what's that face thing, man? What's that face inside this rock structure? I mean, it couldn't be a human being standing because the rock, the hillside formation does not suggest where a person could be standing unless there was a underground environment where that face, the rest of the body of that face is, but it doesn't seem that it would be possible. I mean, it's a face inside a rock, peering out, looking at the rover, and there's a little person that seems to be waving at the rover. I mean, my God, man, what's going on? What is going on Mars?
Even when they came out a few months ago, where they said that there is actual water on Mars, I was thinking to myself, if there's water trapped underneath the surface and dealing with the heat coming from the core, you would think that there has to be, the environments are there, that there is the possibility of life.
There has to be.
Well, this group of people, I call them the team. They have photography of water on Mars. We have evidence of water on Mars. All right, I just didn't have that in my film because I was talking about, look, there's pyramids, there's little people, there's other things on Mars besides water. I mean, water, okay, but there is water on Mars. There's an oceans up there.
Europa is another big one. If they can get to penetrate the ice sheet and see what's in those oceans, I'm sure even if it's microbial, I mean, there has to be evidence of life out there. There just has to be, even on the simplistic terms. But
did you see the Pluto photograph that I have in full color of the ocean?
Yes.
And there's an object, there's a building dead center that has the lights on.
Yeah, I seen that.
Oh my God, man, what is going on? This planet Pluto, and NASA said, "Oh, Pluto is nothing." No, mothers. Pluto is inhabited by somebody. I mean, my God, guys, what can I say? The photography is there. I'm surprised that NASA released that full color photograph that I was able to get my hands on. And this was through resources that I have that are getting me photography like this. When I do the IMAX film of the moon and Martians, I'm going to have so much stuff that's just going to blow people out of the water, dude.
Yeah, and to people that might, find some of this information hard to take in and believe, we don't ask that you believe it just from listening to this interview. Take a look at some of the past documentaries and the future ones coming up and make up your own mind. We're not trying to make you believe this stuff. I know.
Here's the thing that I want people to know, Jamie. I produce films that reveal the evidence as it presents itself. I do not make stuff up. I don't have to. I present the evidence. This is what I see, and all I'm doing is presenting it as it presents itself. I might zoom in, I might pan the picture, but I present the evidence as it presents itself to me and to everyone, man. So that's what I do. I don't do anything to fake people out. I have no reason to fake people out.
Right. You're just putting it out there for public awareness and to let them reach their own conclusions.
That's it. I just present the evidence as it presents itself, and you can have your own thoughts about it. If you believe it, fine. If you don't believe it, that's your prerogative, man.
That's how I approach radio. I do my interviews. If people want to, take what's being heard for the truth, then that's great. If they don't, well,
It's their
up to them.
prerogative.
Exactly.
That's the way I am. That's the way I am. I do not have to BS people. Guys, this is what I'm showing you. Look at it, man. I got my hands on it. Look at it. Take your own perspective on it, but what you're seeing is what's there, as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
So,
now, do you think that the European Space Agency or the Japanese or Chinese, we might get better information, a more open, I would say, platform when it comes to footage rather than NASA? You think that's a credible source to go to? I'll quote unquote credible, but to use their space agencies for footage?
well, I sure wish we could. Okay, because as far as I'm concerned, the foreign space agencies are all in cahoots with NASA. If you saw my film Moon Rising, you see how they all incorporate the same logo that NASA has. All right? You saw that, right? In
Yes.
Moon Rising? All the foreign space agencies have incorporated the same logo. Maybe a different version of it, but they all incorporate the same logo that NASA has. So they're all part of the major cover-up. They're all part of concealing the evidence. They're all part of, definitely they're all part of perpetuating the myth that the moon is a black and white celestial body, when in fact it's a full-color celestial body. And I disclose that in my film Moon Rising, and also in my films Celestial and Luna. I show how the moon is a full-color celestial body. And when I do these IMAX films, man, these IMAX films are going to be hits, man, because it's a total different audience, a total worldwide audience that goes into this. And IMAX people are willing to present my films, man. This is what's amazing to me.
That really is.
It's a new frontier, man, as far as the moon, Martians, and the rods. I'm doing the new rods film. They live in the skies. It's going to be presented in IMAX theaters. By the time I'm through with it, it's going to be amazing, guys.
Yeah, Bill and I touched on that early in the show while we were waiting to get you on. We talked a bit about the rods. And, there's a lot of controversy out there with people because, some people catch bugs up close, which kind of resemble what you've seen. But I also pointed out the fact that the first rod, I believe it was the first one that you found, was at an airport very high in the sky, was not anything up close, traveling very high speeds. There's definitely a difference in, bugs that people capture on camera and what you're researching and have been researching and putting out there.
Yeah, but you know what's happening, guys? And I'm sending you I should have sent this earlier to you guys. We finally have high-speed photography of rods as never before. We finally have footage of rods shot by high-speed cameras at 4K resolution. Do you know what 4K is?
Yeah, that's insane.
That's huge, man. I just sent you the link.
All right.
Present that link to your viewers, listeners.
Yeah.
Wait till I do this rods film. They live in the skies. It's going to freak people out because we finally have solid evidence that rods are not insects. This was stuff shot at 24p, 24 real frames per second, no interlacing, which is what the debunkers and the skeptics have said. Rods are misfilmed insects because of interlacing of video. No, this is 24 frames per second, real frames per second, and 4K resolution. This is IMAX resolution, guys. All right, we finally have technology that has finally come back to the rods.
Yeah, that's incredible.
I also
right
have
there.
a guy in Washington, D.C. that's filming rods using cameras that are better than the International Space Station, filming rods over Washington, D.C.'s no-fly zone. And you'll see this in the promo. They live in the skies. This is
I see 10 of them in a group here, and it's just amazing.
He has squadrons, man. Squadrons of God.
What's your best explanation that these could possibly be? Do you have one yet?
We don't know where they come from. We don't know what they're doing here, but I can tell you they are here.
Could they be live organisms, though? Do you think this could be actual living entities?
They could be, but we also have them in space. We have footage of the space shuttles filming them coming in and out of Earth, and we also have them on Mars.
The Fireflies, too.
So we have rods on Mars, guys.
Interesting.
Shot by the rover. What can you do? What can you tell me about that one? So we don't know what they are. This IMAX movie, They Live in the Skies, it's going to freak people out. And I have a distributor that's willing to put this film out. 40-minute movie. I'm going to announce the discovery of a new life form. So it's going to be awesome, Jamie and Bill.
You have to keep us up to date on this, because this way we can tell the listeners where they can expect to go view this.
It'll be at any IMAX theater. That's
wow.
Hopefully I'll get that kind of distribution. But I have a company called Big and Digital .com that's going to be releasing my films, and they're going to put them in as many IMAX theaters as they can worldwide. So it's going to be badass, guys. Badass. I love it.
Well, we're going to start wrapping up here. You have anything coming up in the future? Any appearances coming up? Any conferences you'll be attending? Anything like that?
Well, the International UFO Congress, which I haven't been to since 1998, I'm presenting UFOs from Outer Space and Celestial for the EBE Awards, which is the awards that they have. I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it personally, but I have people that are going to be there to accept the award if I win. If I don't win, hey, what can you do,
Hey,
but
it's nominated. That's the main thing. It's being recognized. That's essential to it.
Yeah, that's cool. So all I care is it's there, it's being presented. If it wins, it wins. If it doesn't, that's fine too. I have friends that have films there too, aside from mine. So whatever, it doesn't matter to me. All I can tell you is I'm making these IMAX movies, and that's what's next, and it's going to be huge.
What's the time frame on some of these being completed?
I'm saying Moons, 100 Miles from the Moon, and Martians are going to be completed by April, and released later this year, maybe August or September.
You must be a very busy man.
Oh yeah. They Live in the Skies, the Rods film, is going to be starting production in March and probably released also in April or May or June of this year. But they will be released in giant screens, man. IMAX.
Jose, do you still have time to actually do any kind of sky watching or take photographs?
No, I haven't sky watched in years, guys. I've just been making movies, perfecting my filmmaking, perfecting my art, making movies. I have enough evidence that I've accumulated over the years, both on the rods and on the moon and Mars, that all I'm concentrating on is making badass movies that people can enjoy for the first time and be totally amazed. That's what I'm doing, guys.
Well, we definitely look forward to all that is to come from your documentaries. It's going to be very interesting. We look forward to.
All right, so you've been listening to an old show replay that Jamie and I did, interviewing Jose Escamilla. I think we did that back in April of this year, or maybe March. So, yeah, and I want to say hello to everybody that's on Keith's stream. Hope you're enjoying it. I'm going to continue with some other shows, archives. And I just want to say that on Friday, because I just got the message, since I'm going to be producing the show, I think we have a guest announced for Patrice Sheridan's show. since I'll be producing again that night, it will be Robert Stanley, and they'll be discussing his book, Covert Encounters in Washington, D.C., WikiLeaks, etc. So that's what she'll be discussing with him as her guest. I'm just looking at a plane going across my screen. So I'm going to get back to the archives, but before I do that, I want to say hello again to everybody that's in Keith's stream. And over here, I want to say hello to X-Lady, Kath, Dave, Derek Hunt, Marco, Stargazing in the UK, Lorraine, Carmen and Mauricio in California, Dead Sun. Let's see who else is hanging out. Of course, Jello. Well, it's actually Jello. It's not of course Jello. It's Jello. And Sarah. Let's see. I'm scrolling up. I can imagine because in Keith stream they couldn't even try to scroll up. It was going so fast. They had thousands of people watching the stream the other night. Again, just great work over there. It is now P and K. I got to go up to when he was on here. He may want to come into my room to check it out and put a link, but I know he changed the name. Maybe somebody in chat can help me on my end. So yes, he is doing his thing with Paul on the other channel on YouTube. I don't know if you can still go to Space Imaging Keith and catch it. P and K Space Imaging. Let me just go to their page and get the link. It's P as in Peter and K as in Keith, Space Imaging. So they're streaming right now live The Moon. So we're going to continue with the old streams of my show. And there he is. Let me post his link in my chat. And I'm going to play. Yes, Mom.
Yes, Mom.
What are you up to?
No, give me that plate.
You're lurking. You're lurking.
Lurking.
Here. It's better than twerking. Here.
No, not good.
Take the hot sauce.
What the hell? What do you think I'm your space? Give me that. Look.
Give you what?
Are you sure?
Yes.
Are you sure
Yeah, I'm listening.
that you didn't put those keys there?
Hell no, I didn't leave those keys there.
How can that be?
Oh, and speaking of that, another incident in my house last night. I'm sitting here, and Mom's witness because I yelled immediately. Here, Ma.
No, I just don't.
I seen a light appear
From here to over there.
on my electric heat stove to my right that I'm looking. A light just appeared, and then it went, shoo, gone. And my windows were closed. Everything was closed, so it was one of those odd moments again in the house. All right, let me continue with.
No, actually.
Well, it's gonna be quiet now, but it'll get more active after midnight. Probably like 1 or 2 in the morning. So I'm gonna be up. Anyway, this is Mike Carano on an interview. Dead Son, you might like this. Really intense, deep conversation about space and alien life, etc. So I'm gonna play that right now.
Yeah, really, I don't want to smoke.
Okay, give it back to me. I'll do it.
Yeah. You should stop.
I am New Year's resolution. Anyway, let me just skip this a little bit. I think it was a black helicopter. Oh, Keith, you're going to get a kick out of this because I mentioned you on the air. So, yeah, this is when I mentioned you, Keith. All right, so again, here we go.
Hello, guys, and welcome to tonight's show. Thank you for joining us. We just finished listening to Task Force Griffin with Commander Cobra, another great show and a great addition to KGRA. I'd like to welcome my co-host Bill to the show. How you doing, Bill?
Good evening, Jamie, and hello to all the listeners and everyone in the KGRAradio.com chat room. So what's going on?
You tell me. You're the one that's been doing some sky watching. Have you seen anything?
Actually, we did. We did one a few nights ago. And Al of the Bronxville Paranormal Society was with us, and he told me, Bill, they're doing an air show because we seen something that looked really odd, Jamie. It looked like an AWACS went over my house really low, and we did see a few days before that what looked like a helicopter, and I went outside. There was no sound. I think it was a black helicopter. And then another friend of ours, Brian from the Bronxville Paranormal Society, is having sightings of black vans outside his house. And
wow.
A friend of mine, Keith, who does unbelievable. These guys, Jamie, they do great work on YouTube. Space Imaging Keith. His friend Paul has all these telescopes down in Florida, and they do lunar observations and planetary observations, and he had a black van following him for a few days. So it's just one of those things that's going on right now between us and on the YouTube sky watching. We're having some crazy activity going on. I don't know, it's all coincidence, but it brought up a really interesting conversation. So it's just something that we all found a little bit odd, to say the least.
I would say so. I had a strange dream. That's about all I can say, is that I seen a UFO, and I was trying to tell somebody. But what's strange is, in the dream, I knew exactly where it was in my town and what time to be there to see it. So I'm like, should I actually go there and check it out or not?
You know what? I had a crazy dream last night. I spoke to Eric a little bit Eric is a MUFON field investigator in Boston, Massachusetts. But Jamie, I had a vivid dream last night, really lucid, about a structure being built into the sky, into space. And in the dream, I was told it would take over 200 years to build. All the countries of the world would have to come together. And I seen a spacecraft flying from this thing into deep space. I was like, whoa, this is heavy. This is just too heavy for me. Yeah. I never had a dream like that. And then I seen these little black cubes that were going around and building. They were engineering things. And I was like, what is this kind of dream? Where did this come from? So, yeah, I had a very odd kind of a dream myself. But, Jamie, before we get to our guest, A.K.A Carano, we have a trivia question. If you want to ask it, go for it.
Yeah.
I'm going to skip on that because that's a show archive.
You guys are going to be answering this.
I'm just going to skip over it a little bit.
Yes.
KGRA bumper stickers, the next meteor shower.
Okay.
And we're qualified to talk about
Here we go.
the topics we will tonight.
Okay, I'm an experimental philosopher, and I'm a systems consultant. I'm living and working out of the greater Yale, New Haven area of Connecticut. I've launched a consulting agency. I'm the senior intelligence vice president of it. It's called Avatar Paradigms, and what we essentially specialize in is bringing the message of holism and synergy and conscious evolution. And that's what we apply to corporate boardrooms. We apply it in public symposiums, etc.
All right.
Okay, I just hear everybody just glazed over. I'm like, wait a minute, hold on, I can hear the crickets.
Well, I'm trying to see if people in chat got the question right at the same time. But yeah,
I'm talking about Mach 26, so I'm going to have to go ahead and shave it down a little bit.
But now, how does this, like Jamie X, how does that specifically tie into, let's just say, for what we're really going to be speaking about tonight is ufology?
Okay. So one of the things which I did is, because I'm coming from an unconventional background, is I decided to apply a system or a methodology of philosophy towards tackling some of the largest conundrums that are currently plaguing us in the 21st century, at least philosophical conundrums. And I like to tackle paradoxes, or what things people consider to be unsolvable, as a means of proving the efficacy of my philosophical method. So one is the existence of God. I've tackled that several times. Other things are the existence of whether or not moral phenomena can be proven to objectively exist or not. In this particular case, I like to apply metanoetics to the world of ufology because it's so elegantly applicable in terms of rendering the unknown known, at least in this particular case, that it almost becomes effortless in the sense of clarifying what's taking place in the field of ufology.
Now, how did your interest in ufology begin?
Sorry, I'm laughing.
No,
right, go ahead.
We're all listening. How did your interest in ufology begin? Can you give us an update on what we discussed on the previous show as well?
Yeah. Okay. So when I was a kid, my mother was always growing up, and my mother was always talking when I was growing up about something called the Hudson Valley sighting that she saw many, many, many moons ago, and I thought that was fascinating. But one time when I was in school, my fourth grade teacher mentioned that she herself had also witnessed it, and that gave it an air of credibility. So I began investigating a little bit when I was a kid, and then as I got older, the question basically took on a little bit more philosophical significance, and then I immersed myself in doing a lot of reading, and then material just basically became unearthed as I progressed down the path of that, and some of it just became you just couldn't ignore the content. And if you did ignore the content, it was to your peril. So that's how I ended up pretty much where I am right now, at least on the subject.
Wait, now, I'm in the Hudson Valley in New York.
Sure.
I want to hear more about this Hudson Valley experience because I want to know if I'm familiar with it, or if I am not, I want to know more about it.
You know, I have information prepared for that. So if that's something you want to touch upon, I'm ready for that. But there's certain background knowledge that I need to sort of get people caught up to speed with in order so they could understand the method that I'm using to apply to the problem. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Okay. You might remember the last time that we conversed that I discussed something called metanoetics. Do you guys remember that?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I still think, like I said, it might be helpful to give your listeners a crash course in metanoetics, and that way they can sort of apply everything I'm talking about in their own experience to understand what it is. And the concept of metanoetics actually begins with the phrase meta, which is Greek for beyond, and nuos, which means knowledge. And the term itself wasn't coined by me. It actually comes from a guy named Hajime Tanabe. He was a Japanese philosopher. He's the first person to coin it. And he used the term to denote what he at least believed to be insights whose nature transcended the limits of rationality. So when I decided to call my philosophy metanoetics, I wasn't aware that Tanabe had already beat me to it. And I thought that I really invented the term, but an old friend of mine who's actually another philosopher, he ran it by me, and he just basically told me that I needed to check out Tanabe's work, which is pretty much exactly what I did. And when I was looking at it, it's safe to say that the similarities between his thinking and mine staggering. They're just staggering. And since that moment, I've kind of decided to continue to work with the understanding that Tanabe's metanoetics was really something that he was applying to philosophies that would transcend the limits of rationality, and that mine would fall into that. So I kind of credited him as naming my philosophy posthumously. But today, like I said, I don't think it's just purely a coincidence between our work. I think it's more along the lines of a case of really synchronicity. And how the idea of metanoetics first occurred to me is that it was around the time that I was wrapping up my first book. It's called Asleep in the Helix, Survival and the Science of Self-Realization. And it was during that time that I was really involved in a really intense meditation session, and the entire philosophy just occurred to me in a stroke of insight. And sometimes I like to joke by equating the knowledge as being transmitted to me in a kind of Gnostic state of mystical theosis, or an aeon receiving pneumatic wisdom from the pleroma. That's something Gnostics would really recognize. And other times I like to parallel it to maybe receiving something like a Jewish Merkabalim, which would be Ein Sof knowledge, or knowledge from beyond the limits of the temporal.
Is this part of like a meditative state that you're getting?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. That's where it occurred to me. That's what it occurred to me. As a matter of fact, Indian rishis, they call it Satchidananda, and they basically describe it as the merging of Atman and Brahman. It also comes it also calls into question things like the Akasha. But really, all jokes aside, the reality is that something like that happened to me, and I'm patently convinced that was the case. That's how metanoetics occurred to me. And once the philosophy was given to me, really all that was left was for me to find the language to express the idea. And what distinguishes the idea from other philosophies is pretty simple, because most philosophers attempt to build a philosophical system starting with metaphysics. They take that as their foundation, and then they stack up an epistemology on top of that, which is a theory of knowledge, and then they move from their epistemology into an ethics. And the problem that I've discovered with this method is that all philosophers have been trying to organize a worldview according to it, and they've always discovered that metaphysics will interpenetrate with epistemology, which will interpenetrate with ethics, and there's no way to neatly subdivide the two. You always end up with ethical assumptions in your metaphysics or metaphysical assumptions in your epistemology. And how I survive the problem is that metanoetics sort of function like an inkblot or a Rorschach. They're an epistemology when looked at from one perspective. They're in metaphysics when looked at from another perspective, and they're in ethics when looked at from the other perspective. But they're all three simultaneously. So kind of like the quantum collapse of a wave function, depending on who's looking at it and how it's being applied, it changes. So, like I said, it's literally morphing, it's evolving, it's changing identities according to the context. And, other than this, it's distinguishable from other philosophies because it's not really a model of consciousness the way how a lot of epistemologies are, but it really empowers the ability of individuals to think in 4D. Some people think in 2D. Most people I know think in 2D. Others think in 3D, but metanoetics gives people the capacity to think in 4D. So if we look at guys like Ken Wilber, he's an integral philosopher. He created a paradigm which attempts to see the world in terms of 4 distinct apertures, which he calls subjective and objective and intersubjective and interobjective. And the problems that intersubjective and interobjectivity are, they're still types of subjectivity and objectivity. They're not fundamentally different perspectives in as much as they are different scales within the same two-dimensional framework of subjective and objective dichotomies. And that means even Ken Wilber is a two-dimensional thinker, which really shocks a lot of people when they find it out. And the reason why I say this is pretty simple, and it's simply because most people are straight out familiar with subjectivity and objectivity, but virtually no one has ever heard of the adjective dimension of things, which are contextual interrelations, and how they unify subjective and objective, or even the projective dimension of things, which is basically pure potentials, which the objective and the subjective and the adjective appeal to as modifications of. And these are pretty much all perspectives which are present in my model of thinking, and it's precisely why metanoetics transcends and includes these modalities. Integral theorists don't do that. And because insofar as their view of the world is essentially a two-dimensional split between the inner and outer dimensions, metanoetics, they transcend integral thinking due to their capacity to think in 4D.
All right.
So,
I don't want to I don't want to interrupt, but I just want
no, go ahead.
This is really intense, so you may want to pull the throttle back a little bit because
right.
Everybody
okay, so,
is trying to...
let me just simplify it. Basically, metanoetics allow people to think in 4 dimensions. And when we do think in 4 dimensions, problems become much easier to solve. Most people think either subjectively and objectively, that's 2 dimensions, but I add 2 additional dimensions on top of that to allow people to problem solve. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah,
okay.
I want to just interject one thing. Is this also about like a lot of the mainstream scientists don't open themselves up to, they have this narrow-minded vision and they're not going to these other tangents, these other fringy areas?
No, I know exactly what you're talking about. But what you're talking about is called scientism, which is distinct from science. And scientism is the worldview that science alone is the only approach to knowledge. Science alone has privileged access to truth. That's science in a pathological form. I am almost religiously pro-scientific, but at the same time, I am vehemently anti-scientistic. And so what? I'll give you an example. Where does the number 5 exist? I think we talked about this on your last show. Is it an object? Is it a sub? What is it? It doesn't physically exist. So what the hell is it?
The thought.
It's a relationship. It's an adjective type of thing. So if we're going to take scientism on its face, it would have to deny the very existence of its metaphysical foundations, which is the reality of numbers, which would make science itself illegitimate. So that's where metanoetics picks up. Numbers do exist, but they're adjective qualities that exist between objective things and in some instances subjective things. That's where they exist. So metanoetics adds an additional dimension in the way that we approach problems, and it works because these dimensions actually exist.
Okay,
and,
but would the use of mathematics be the best way to communicate with another civilization if it was advanced? Wouldn't it be?
There's a lot of assumptions about that. I think that they're probably going to have some concept of mathematics, but frankly, their intelligence is alien to us. It'd be exceedingly difficult to imagine how they might approach the problem. They might not even need math or numbers. Like, for example, Nikola Tesla calculated things by morphing the geometries in his own head without having to compute the numbers behind it. They might use something similar to that. It might be totally analogical thinking rather than, binary computational models. We tend to break things down into binary computational models, so how they're approaching the problem could be a little bit different. But hold on. I got to back up for a split second because sometimes I talk so fast that I got to catch up to my own train of thought.
And just so you know, those in chat, they really
that's that happens to me.
A little bit slow down so they can comprehend everything that's going on.
They're trying to absorb the knowledge. Yeah.
Now, in this particular instance, how metanoetics applies to ufology is that we would take the 4 dimensions of it, and we would map it out to the 4 different dimensions of the UFO phenomena. I named the 4 different dimensions, each one corresponding to a different stratosphere of perspective, or a stratus of perspective. So if you are looking at things from a subjective point of view, the subjective perspective corresponds with something I call an archetypal continuum. It's the field of the ideas. If you're looking at things from a holistic and an adjective point of view, that corresponds and it maps onto something called an existential matrix, which is the world of contextual interactions and how context influences the way that we interact with things. If you're looking at something from an objective perspective, that maps on to the chaotic axis of things or the chaotic abstract of things. It's what you're isolating for analysis. And if you're looking at something from a projective perspective, that maps onto the dimension of what we would call an aeonic event. In the past, they used to call it a noetic core, but my terminology is constantly evolving as the philosophy becomes more accurate. But just as reality has 4 dimensions, in our brain is really equipped with 4 perceptual dimensions for engaging with these dimensions. Like I said, our minds are similarly equipped with 4 dimensions to tackle these dynamics. And the first dimensional level of thinking I call primal, and it's basically because it's for contemplating the archetypal continuum of things. The second dimension is really called reductionistic. The third dimension, it's holistic, and the fourth dimension, it's called transcendent. So I think we have some of the background information that we need in order to start approaching the problem of ufology, and I think we could get through this frigging gallimaufry of vomit that I'm spewing, so that I could actually get down to something that people can actually enjoy. You ready?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So the thing about it is that if we're going to approach it, the question of whether or not extraterrestrials are visiting us is something that's already been taken. It's been taken very, very seriously. And in this particular instance, we could turn to the work of Nikola Kardashev. You guys heard of the Kardashev scale, right?
I have not.
A little bit.
Okay. So Kardashev, he basically formulated what he believes to be 3 distinct images of the various kinds of extraterrestrials that humanity is likely to encounter or to discover in the cosmos. And he calls them civilizations type 1, 2, and 3.
Gotcha.
Super, super simple. And according to Kardashev, he said that a type 1 civilization is really any civilization which achieved a technological mastery over the available energy resources of its native planet. So in other words, we're talking nuclear energy, wind power, solar power, fossil fuel, any civilization which has achieved close to a type 1 level of sophistication has harnessed all the natural energy resources on this planet. Humanity is about a 0.7. That's how close we are. But when we get to type 1, we're probably going to be in space by then. Mm-hmm. After type 1, there's type 2. A type 2 civilization is, again, we're on the precipice of probably discovering one of these things. But basically, it's any civilization that's mastered all the energy resources it has, not only on its own native planet, but also all the resources of it, or all the energy of its local star, of its star output. Mm-hmm. So the 20th century Freeman Dyson, we all know who this guy is, but he's hypothesized a speculative technology that he believed would make this possible, and it was a theoretical megastructure that he called a Dyson sphere. And essentially, a Dyson sphere is a kind of technological shell which is structured so it entombs a star, and what it does is it captures all the energetic output of it. That's what he speculated that it would probably do. But he didn't just basically stop at saying that Dyson spheres might be possible, but he also proposed the existence of things like Dyson swarms, and Dyson swarms would orbit the star like highly sophisticated satellites, and he also proposed the existence of things like Dyson nets and Dyson shells. And even more advanced than a Type 2 civilization would be something he called a Type 3 civilization. And it's a civilization that, at this particular level, would be incredibly ancient, and relative to our perspective, it would be possessed of seemingly godlike technology. We wouldn't even be able to comprehend it. So Type 3 civilizations, they might be races so advanced that they would literally have obtained complete and total mastery over all the energy resources of their local galaxy. And that's astonishing to us. It's an astonishing level of complexity, at least. Mm-hmm. And the difference between such a civilization ourselves is, like I said, it's liable to say the difference between, I don't know, the difference between the civilizational complexity of our civilization versus a colony of ants in your backyard. Mm-hmm. And some listeners out there, they're probably tempted to dismiss these categories as impossible. And for the most part, they'd be correct, but we need to qualify what it means to call something impossible. And the best resource that I know for doing the job is to cite the work of another genius. His name is Michio Kaku. We all know who he is. He's a Japanese-American theoretical physicist, and he's also the co-creator of string theory. And according to Dr. Kaku, realities, it's just not so simple as to just say something's possible or something's impossible. And these situations need to be thought through with a little bit more rigor, because for Dr. Kaku, there's really 4 categories we can use to categorize the scientific technology. And the first he called possible. We all agree to that. Certain science and certain technologies are possible to us. But after that, things get a little bit more complex, because Kaku says there are at least 3 kinds of impossible that we know of. One is class 1 impossibilities, another is class 2 impossibilities, and the other is class 3 impossibilities. So Dr. Kaku begins by saying that something belongs to what we delineate as a class 1 impossibility. If that, and I quote this, let me grab my note over here. The technologies are impossible today, but they don't violate the known laws of physics. Okay, I can put this away now. So that's what it is. If the technologies are possible today, but they don't violate the known laws of physics, that's a class 1 impossibility. So we're talking quantum processors, we're talking room temperature superconductors, 3D printing with biological organs being the product of output. These might be used to replace ones that are failing. We're talking about the power to teleport materials from one location to another. All of these things are theoretically possible, but we don't know how to do them yet with the current level of sophistication. Those would be class 1 impossibilities. Mm-hmm. After that, there would be class 2 impossibilities. And Dr. Kaku would define these technologies. Oh, I got to grab my card again. He would say that they're technologies which sit at the very edge of our understanding of the physical world. Mm. So in this particular case, these are types of technologies that typify sci-fi. They're technologies that are decades that are decades away from where we are, or not even that. They're probably centuries or even millennia. But we're talking about time travel. We might be talking about superluminal speeds and maybe even throwing open portals to higher dimensions. And one example that I could think of what technology might look like at this scale would be one night I was going to sleep and I was dreaming, and I had an idea regarding how it might be possible to shift between dimensions. And if you think about it, if you guys know anything about physics, and I love to read physics, I study physics. I'm not a physicist, but I know about it. I can talk about it. If a hypothetical machine were capable of generating like an anti-gravity pressure wave, and it just extends in all dimensions, and if we could collide the anti-gravity pressure wave with standard gravity in the first and the second and third dimensions, then when the wavefronts collide and they annihilate one another in three-dimensional space, the only place that they would have to remain for the pressure to travel would be into the fourth dimension and higher. So anything in the wake trail of that would basically get dragged into another dimension by the suction as the pressure wave propagated into a higher dimensional hyperspace, which we'd experience as gravity from nowhere sucking us into the fourth dimension. That's how interdimensional travel, at least in the way how I understand it, might be possible. But again, it's a class 2 possibility. It's a perfect example of what we're talking about. We're centuries away from it, maybe thousands of years, who knows? But that's like I said, a classic example of what I would call a class 2 impossibility. And then class 3 impossibilities, Kaku described as. Let me grab this notes over here again. Okay, they're technologies that violate the known laws of physics. Okay. Simple enough. They're technologies that violate the known laws of physics. But what would such a class 3 impossibility resemble to us? We can't really imagine it, really. It might look like magic. But I think I can give you an example that I thought of about a year ago that, Bill, I think this is going to shock you. I think it's going to blow your mind. I think you're going to be the guy that's going to really appreciate this. You see, according to Einstein's general theory of relativity, really nothing could exceed the speed of light, because anything that reaches the speed of light becomes light itself. Mm-hmm. Now, if you bear that in mind, and if you remember something called the law of accelerating returns, which basically states that the speed of technological sophistication doubles every 18 months, and you combine that with what the speed of light tells us about it, then what that means is that any sufficiently advanced civilization whose technology graduates to the point of advancing at a speed which is equal to or greater than the speed of light would spontaneously vanish and become a civilization that's entirely made out of light. And all of their technologies would be at that point no longer detectable to us. That might be the cosmic microwave background. The cosmic microwave background just might consist of Type 3 civilizations which have begun to advance so rapidly that they exceeded the light barrier, dispersed into a race of purely photonic beings or tachyonic beings, and that's kind of what they just might be. And for all intents and purposes, they would literally be godlike. They'd be outside of time, they'd be outside of space, just like photons. They would transcend all limits of matter, and they'd exist simultaneously everywhere and nowhere, and that would be utterly unbeholden to all the known laws of physics that we could possibly understand. But we at least have a precedent in Einsteinian relativity theory to imagine how that might be. But that's something along the lines of a Type 3 impossibility.
Now, I just had to kill that because my head is spinning. And I remember doing this interview, and I had to have a big, tall, forget about a single shot, forget about a double shot. I had to take a triple shot after that show. There was something on the screen because I couldn't take it. It was the pressure in my head was like, whoa, holy Christ. I mean, if he would have just slowed down a little bit, I think it would have been good, but it was like 1,000,000 miles per hour. I mean, wow. It was amazing. It was just another. What the hell is that going across the screen. All right, somebody please tell me what the hell that was just going across my screen. That was no bug. You got... Well, I got to just say, what the F was that? Anyway, I'm going to... If anybody wants to join me on Skype now, that'd be a nice time. Keith, if you want to come on and entertain those that are on your channel, I'm open to do that. So, looks like he's had some issues over there on his watch with the trolls. It's amazing. This is what gets me. People, Keith and Paul deserve a lot of credit. It's a lot of time and effort and expense to do what they're doing to provide this for everyone. Then you have these few people that come in there to stir things up. And it's so unfortunate because what they're doing is exceptional. It's extraordinary. So, yeah, it's unbelievable. It makes me crazy when people do things like that. It's just not fair. It really isn't, because they're doing a great job over there with the streaming. So hopefully people are still checking it out on Keith's stream and watching it and enjoying it. It's something that is really incredible, like I said, because you get to see close up in the craters, and you'll see a view of the moon you probably haven't before. If you're new to his stream. If you're not, you know what it's like to see what he provides and Paul provides on their channel. And they did change the name. It is now P as in Peter and K as in Keith space imaging. So it's P and K space imaging. So you can definitely go check out their channel. Maybe he'll get the chat going up in a few minutes. And I don't know what the heck that was on my screen, but there was something going across and it was curving. Couldn't have been a satellite. A satellite's not going to do that. Not with that curvature. It had to be either a bug, which I really find unlikely, or something else. I just don't know what that was on the screen a few seconds ago. So again, go check out P&K Space Imaging. They do a great job over there. So I'm going to continue with a much more mellow show after that. But first, I want to say hello to everybody in chat. Dave and Carmen and Mauricio, Stargazing in the UK, Earth Sound, Jello, Amanda, who's going to do a show right now in about 5 minutes. Black Swamp Radio, friend Wise Frog is the host, 2-hour show. Maybe Amanda could put the link for the show in chat. And what's up to Derek and Duplicat and Lorraine. And let's see who else is about in the chat. John Charles and Sarah. Snarls hanging out. And I'm trying to prevent the music from going on tonight. First of all, because Keith is using my audio and he'll just hit me over the head. So we're not going to do any music. And plus, this way I could save my stream and not delete it if we do the coverage, which we are, if the weather permits, of the Leonid's meteor shower early this morning. So I'm going to be going to at least 5 a.m. It's only 10 now Eastern time, so I got another 7 hours. I've been on for about 5 already. It's unbelievable that I went that fast. I think I started at about 6 or a little after. So yeah, I've been going about 4 hours already. Okay, so blackswampradio.net. So if you want to go check it out, it starts in about 5 minutes. Amanda does the news segment there. She also, from time to time, does interviews herself and does a great job. So I'm thinking about, I wish I could put music on, but I can't. So I'm going to put another file, nothing like what we just heard. Wow. I'm just trying to pick the one I want to hear. And I've got a bunch in front of me here. There's an easier way. Let me go to a different file location where I use for the network. Let's see. And there's a plane on the screen now. So let's see. 2016. Who do we have? Well, I'm missing a lot of files from here. You know, I want to stay on the space theme
because of what Keith is streaming right now. I'm trying to think of the right file. Aztec UFO was pretty good. They were interesting. Then there's always my friend Jennifer Stein. I could play my show. Let's see. Okay. Let me think here. Which stream do I want? Let's see. Let me go back a little bit. 2015. What's in there? Last year's shows that we did. I'm not going to do any of the remote viewings with Courtney. Let's see. I don't remember what Tom Monson was speaking about. Rich Hoffman. Let's see. I'm stuck on which file to play here. I think I'll go back to 2016. And let's pick out, I'll just go with the Aztec UFO story. Let me see what people are saying in chat. I actually could play that file with, let me get that going. I just got a message on my phone. Okay, no big deal. Sports related. All right, let me just get a stream on. I'll just go with, let's do Aztec. The heck with it. Let me skip through some commercials.
All right, guys,
Here we
welcome
go.
to the show. Thank you all for tuning in. The Jamie Aberkin Show on KGRA The Planet with my co-host Bill Forte. We are live. How you doing, Bill?
Good evening, Jamie, and good evening to all the listeners and everyone in the KGRAradio.com chat room, and happy holidays.
Indeed, 4th of July weekend. I'm not doing anything special except maybe shooting a few rounds off if I get lucky. It sounds like a war zone on the 4th of July New Year's here in the deep south in Florida.
Well, up here it gets a little dicey up here too. But yeah, I hope everybody enjoys their 4th tomorrow and has a great time with the family. Just be safe.
Yeah. My mom had a bad accident when I was a kid. We were leaving a state park, and she had her window cracked. You know, back in the 80s, women wear a lot of hairspray. Well, a bottle rocket come in through the crack right into her hair.
Wow.
It was terrible. You know, being a little kid, I was just terrified.
Well, you know what? When I was younger, we used to go to the playground on a basketball court. And on one side, my friends would be, and me and my other friends would be on the side, and we'd shoot the bottle rockets at each other.
We did the same with the Roman candles.
Yeah. I mean, don't do this at home. I'm just saying.
No,
Something I did when I was young. But, yeah, I mean, we got some really great guests coming up, and we'll get to that in a minute. But I also want to mention there's going to be another festival, UFO conference up here at the end of July 29th and 30th. The Kingston UFO Conference, and Richard Dolan will be there, as well as, again, Jennifer Stein and Peter Robbins and some others. So if anybody's in the Kingston, New York area, it will be July 29th and 30th.
Quick website update. We're currently working on the website over the Jamie Havocan Show. Once it's finished, I will put up the official URL, but right now you can see it by going to jhbroadcasting.info. It'll be done pretty soon. We're getting close, and we hope to provide, upcoming guest information, past show information, things like that there. So we're looking forward to that. Any skywatching this past week, Bill?
No, it's been pretty quiet. I've been pretty busy. I've had company here, and I'm going to have company again this week. So probably be by next week I'll start it up again because it's really been busy. I have company right now at the house, so I'm doing the show with you and having a great time. But yeah, so we'll probably be doing it sometime this week. So
now let's talk about the show tonight. We have 3 guests, Scott and Suzanne Ramsey, as well as Dr. Frank Thayer, and we're going to be talking about the Aztec UFO incident. I'm going to read a little bit about their book, the first ever widely publicized report of a recording flying saucer. It was referred to as a hoax for decades, but the Ramseys and Dr. Frank Thayer reveal the exact spot where the craft landed and show how the 100-foot diameter saucer was moved to a secret laboratory and much more. And tonight, stay tuned towards the end of the show. You're going to hear a very special offer from our guests. If you want to get the book, they're going to throw in something extra. You can check that out at theaztecincident.com. So,
yeah, and this case deserves attention. I know there's a lot of people that are, that's speculative of it and has been saying that it's a hoax, but they have a lot of documentation, witness testimony. I mean, there's a lot of here that it shows to me that it is credible. So I think it's a really interesting case. We always hear about Roswell, but I think more emphasis should be taken on observing what happened in Aztec. And as we'll mention to them later on, it was mentioned in the X-Files.
Indeed. All right, well, with that, we're going to jump into the interview. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any questions during the show, post them in the chat room. We'll do our best to get them answered. All right, well, let's get to our guest of the night. Tonight we're going to be talking to Scott and Suzanne Ramsey, as well as Dr. Frank Thayer, about the Aztec UFO incident. We're going to learn all about it and delve into it. You guys can check out the websites at theaztecincident.com and Dr. Frank Thayer's website at frankthayer.net. That's Frank, Thayer.net. So with that out of the way, I'd like to welcome to the show Scott and Suzanne Ramsey and Frank Thayer. How are you guys doing?
Happy to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you guys. Now, let's start with Scott and Suzanne. How did you guys get interested in this case? What was it that piqued your interest and got you researching this case?
Well, I was out in Farmington back in late 87. I believe it was October. And seeing a customer, I kind of got rerouted because of bad weather in Charlotte. Instead of my flight going Denver to Charlotte, it was canceled. So I called a customer down in Farmington and said, hey, we've never met. We've talked by phone. I can take a commuter flight down to see you. How's your day look tomorrow? He said, I'd make it wide open for you. So I got in there Thursday night. Friday, we were testing a big generator. And what I do for a living is we make magnet wire, copper, aluminum, beryllium, whatever. We make wire that creates magnetic fields. So generators, motors, transformers, maglev machines, CAT scans, anything like that, we make wire for. So as we were going late into Friday night testing this, or not too late, but in the evening of Friday, testing this big generator to see if it in fact needed rewound, two of the gentlemen in the shop were just kind of chatting as we were running a cycle test, and they were talking about what they were going to do that weekend. And the one said he was thinking of going out to look for a place to hunt mule deer. And the other gentleman said, "Why? That sounds good. I might meet you. Where are you going to be?" And he said, out in Hart Canyon. He said, "Whereabouts?" He said, "I'll be out by the old crash site." Well, that kind of perked my ears, and I thought, crash site? That's interesting. So as the evening went on, I was kind of inviting myself into the conversation, and after we tested the generator, we went over to what was then the Holiday Inn at the time and bought a round of drinks, and I said, I'm really interested in this crash site, and they drew me a map, and I attempted to go out the next day and try to find this place. They described it as, well, it's an old wives' tale that a flying saucer crashed out there in late 40s, early 50s. So that piqued my interest, and that was that was 86. And then I came back in January of 87, allotted a lot more time to go out and look for it. And about the second attempt, we found what we thought was the actual site that the locals had called the flying saucer crash site or landing site.
And for me, it was... as a little girl, I grew up in South Dakota. I was originally from Chicago, moved to South Dakota, and my mother was reading Frank Scully's book. I don't know where she got it. It must have been maybe 10 years or more after the fact, so she picked it up in a secondhand store or what. And around the dinner table, she was discussing it and talking about the crash. And then years later, when they decided to move to a warmer climate, They looked around Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and my mom said, I remember that book about Aztec. I would love to live there. So they looked around and they actually ended up moving there.
Wow.
And my mom was very disappointed, though, because nobody really talked about it. There was no recognition of the site or anything at that time. And so that's kind of how that all came about.
Interesting. Now, Frank, did you also read the book Behind the Flying Saucers? I believe that's the name of the book that Frank Scully wrote. Did you do any research into the book, and what was your initial thoughts after you read that book?
Well, I didn't come to this until probably 2002, 3, or 4, and I grew up in New Mexico, and we always believed there was such a thing as flying saucers, but we hadn't even heard of Roswell when I was a little kid. And later on, when I was dealing with such people as Carl Lorenzen and the APRO, and I got on their bulletin and so on, that I was interested, but I had heard of Aztec, and I thought, well, it's supposed to be a hoax, and I just let it drop. In 1980, when the first Roswell incident book came out, that really heightened my interest, and from then on, I was gathering everything I could about crashes and recoveries. And lo and behold, again, in the 2000s, I landed William Steinman's book, A UFO Crash at Aztec, A Well-Kept Secret. And that book is a giant book, and I had never heard of it. And William Steinman, went to Aztec just as Scott Ramsey did and looked around. He thought there was something to it. And it began to coalesce. And I had a website, and I put an essay on my website about the Aztec incident might be the real deal. And that's where Scott and Suzanne found me in 2009. And it took them a couple of minutes to sign me on. I said, yeah, they want to do a book. I wanted to do a book. I was ready for it. So I'm a newcomer, but I guess I've been with them about 7 years now. And we have 2 books to our credit.
The research has been going on. Scott's been doing the research for just over 30 years.
Right.
Now, Scott and Suzanne, how long have you been researching the Aztec UFO case? How much was invested in the research, and what led you to believe that it was a credible case?
Like I said, Scott's been researching for just over 30 years. Mm-hmm. And together, I've been researching with him for the last 13, and that we've been together. And he was on my radio show as a guest. That's how I became familiar with his research. And we've spent, what would you say, hon? About $600,000, something like that, of our own money?
Yeah, we don't. Only the accountant keeps tabs anymore. It's a meaningless number, but yeah, we spent a fair amount of money on it.
Wow, that's
well over. It was $500,000. We did the first book. We probably easily spent another $100,000.
Wow. And how long did it take you guys to put the book together, all 3 of you, and Frank Warren as well?
Yeah, Frank Warren contributed the research on the first book. Back in the day, we probably talked on a daily basis, and he was very, very helpful in helping us put the information together. I don't know if you guys are aware, he's had a little bout with his health here lately, so keep him in your thoughts and prayers. I try to email him every couple days to check on him, and it looks like he's rebounding. But yeah, I researched it pretty much by myself. And then Suzanne and I got married in 2003, and we've researched it together. And then, like Dr. Thayer said, he jumped in about 2009. And it's never stopped. The research is always ongoing. We're always following a lead at some point.
The book, actually, the first took about, what did you say, 2 years?
Yeah,
total
two
took about 2.5 years. And then the second book, we have some new research, which will probably, there's way too much stuff that we actually can share now. But we've got some new leads that we're looking at. But this will give you an idea. The 2 or 3 new leads that we have will probably take us about a year to go through and dissect.
Wow.
That will give you an idea why this type of research. It's not just going on the internet and pulling up and and thinking and, just feeling that somebody's going to feed us accurate information. The type of book that we have decided to present is all fact-based, and meaning that if we can't prove it and document it, that we don't share it in the book. And if there is ever our opinion, we state that it's our opinion. But for the most part, the book is strictly things that we can document.
I commend all three of you, actually, because that's what a good researcher does. They take the time to go over all the documentation. They take it to the field. They do the thorough research, whether there's witnesses, etc. And we'll get into more of that later, but that's the way it should be done, exactly the way you just described it.
Thank you.
Now, did you guys ever go to the site to see if you can uncover any physical evidence or indications that there was a crash?
Let me just pop in here real quick. It's interesting how many people on the internet that you'll see if you pull up anything regarding the Aztec crash, and they will say it's a hoax. And we have nailed it down to 4 investigators, so-called investigators or skeptics. Only one of them has ever even been to the crash site. Scott and I have been there hundreds of times. Scott has stayed overnight there
I've camped there
times.
Many a night.
I mean, you cannot talk about something unless you really know it. It's armchair quarterbacking.
Exactly.
The debunker or skeptic, whatever class we want to put him in, that did go to the crash site only went because he was in my van and I drove him there. and he was captive. He couldn't get out. And I'm talking about the late Carl Flock, who was very, very generous to come up to Aztec and speak at a symposium that was held in Aztec, not just once but twice. But he was the world-renowned expert on Aztec. He lived 2.5 hours away and had never decided to get in his car and drive up to see the crash site. And Suzanne and I live in Mooresville, North Carolina. We're about 1,890 miles from the crash site. And we've been there over 240 times, and I've spent multiple days, weeks camping out there.
And Carl Flock has been remembered in our book, right?
Yes, we named a chapter after Carl. Now, I say that with a little compassion. Carl and I were actually very, very good friends.
Yeah.
We agreed on just about everything in life except for Aztec.
Well, it goes with the territory. I mean, I personally do sky watches, live sky watches with night vision cameras, and you get that. You get the skeptics and the debunkers coming in, but it's welcome. You want to have that conversation, and it makes for a healthy debate. That's
No, that's true.
Well, we always welcome it if because it raises the bar, and we're only looking to document the truth. The problem is when you have people that perpetuate or regurgitate information that is not fact-based.
True.
That's another story altogether.
Now, Frank, did you also go to the site? I read that.
Yes.
So what was your impression about the whole area?
Well, I think that when you go there and you walk up on the mesa and you look around and say, there's a flat spot just big enough to accommodate a 100-foot diameter disc. And you look around, and it's a perfect landing spot for a controlled landing of somebody who has the capacity to do that. And you come away saying, even if you don't know any of the other facts, saying, yes, it could have happened just the way it is in the book. But when you read the book, you'll find witnesses, you'll find observers, you'll find all kinds of people, and none of them have stories that conflict. And that's
physical evidence? Physical evidence?
Well, physical evidence, of course. Remember that this craft landed without any damage. Roswell was an explosion, a crash, and debris. This saucer landed in a controlled manner, and the only damage to it was a little hole in one of the ports, which the book goes into, and that's how they opened it up.
Right. We're definitely going to address how they had gained entry into the vehicle. But Jamie has another question. Go ahead, Jamie.
Yeah. Was there any kind of documents you guys uncovered during the research? Any government documents? Any other research that helped the case?
Yeah, thousands actually. I spent a lot of time on many various trips to Maxwell. Air Force Base in Montgomery, Alabama, which is the archives of everything for the Air Force, with the exception of personnel records. They're kept at St. Louis. The United States Air Force was very aware of something that happened in Aztec, New Mexico. So was the Army Counterintelligence Division, the FBI, the CIA. There's quite a blanket of documents. We have in our archives over 55,000 documents, and I would say probably 5 to 8% of those are government documents that mention Aztec, all the way up to and including a sting operation that transpired with the FBI, the Army, and Air Force trying to recover black and white photographs, their words, not ours, of the Aztec flying saucer.
Same thing with J. Edgar Hoover. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, that's part of the FBI archives. We have copies of letters back and forth with Hoover where Aztec is specifically mentioned in the correspondence.
Wow. Now, were there any witnesses to the event that took place on March 25th, 1948?
Yeah.
You bet.
Go ahead. We'll give that to Thayer. We're hogging the mic here. Go ahead, Frank.
I'm enjoying listening as always. Well, I think that as Scott uncovered living witnesses who were there, who saw the saucer. Now, the story as we have it, we know how many people were on the Mesa that morning, March 25th, 1948. And it ended up there were about 16 people there, a couple of ranchers, a couple of cops, a preacher, and some oil field workers, young men. And Scott was fortunate to get two of the witnesses before they died to tell the story. These are people, Doug Noland and Ken Farley. And they didn't know each other, but they were both on the Mesa that morning for various reasons with the oil companies. And they told Scott the story, chapter and verse, identical. Now, if you went into court with two witnesses who didn't know each other and saw the same incident and reported the details precisely the same, the jury would have to convict on that evidence. So those two witnesses are a foundation for the entire story. And when you read about them, and we have Doug Nolan's interview on tape describing the Aztec saucer. He got up and walked around on it by his own admission. He's the one who saw the hole in the port. And we go from there. And that's a good start. What do you guys think?
We're going to get into actually now soon about the object's description, and we'll see about the landing site. But before we get to that, did these witnesses profit from their experience, and were they debriefed by the military?
Well, Dr. Thayer and Suzanne and I always have a side joke on that. We've never put it really in writing. Over the years, it looked like anybody that was really affiliated with the crash, kind of like the Mac Brazel syndrome from Roswell, they ended up doing pretty well in life. I don't know if that's coincidence or the fact that these old oil field workers and cattle or the ranchers, they're all pretty hard-working people anyway. And usually, when you have hard workers, you have success. But Doug Nolan went on. He was 19 years old the day this happened. He went on to be a very successful assay company in Nevada. His boss ended up going on to owning a fairly successful trucking company, which still is alive today under a different name. We could go on and on through all 16 people, and I won't bore you with it. But we don't know. No one ever admitted to us that they were compensated. But I'm talking two people here, Ken Farley and Doug Nolan. But they obviously did very well in life. Mm-hmm. Again, is that coincidental or whatever? But at the time we got to them to interview them, they were getting up there in age. And that question didn't come up, and I wish it had. I wish I had asked it.
Well, you know what? Maybe from rather threatening and using intimidation and, like I said, threats against individuals, maybe they took the other route, and they made deals with these individuals and said, if you keep your mouth shut, you will be taken care of. That's why I wonder that since a lot of them, they pretty much had, like you said, pretty good careers in their lives. They made good, good lifestyles. That if they were told, in any way that by doing so, that they would, by keeping their mouths quiet, that they would have a substantial, they would get something out of it.
Right.
Yeah.
That's why.
Bill, Bill and Jamie, remember, let's go back and review Mac Brazel's situation. He was a cowboy. He didn't own the ranch. He was just taking care of it. He didn't have two nickels to rub together. He saw this debris field. He went in, was debriefed by the military, given a physical exam, and 2 weeks later he had a brand new truck and he had enough money to buy a frozen food locker in Tularosa, New Mexico. And that can't be a coincidence. Now, the only person that we don't know about doing well financially was the preacher, Solon Brown, who was on the Mesa, but that's another story. But the witnesses told Scott that they were debriefed, that the military took them aside and told them it was for national security. Remember, 1948, people believed the government. I know you can't process that, but back then people trusted the government. Can you imagine that?
Well, it was right after the war, too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yes.
Yeah.
there was a lot of support for the government, especially the success of the war. So I could see that they were swooned, taken in by the government. And there's a naivete there, a gullibility immediately after. So I can actually understand exactly what you just said.
Additionally, they were threatened too.
Yes.
They were to protect their families.
Oh, yes. You can bet on that.
Now, what were some of the witnesses' description of the craft?
The craft measured, well, according to the scientists, but the people that were there that day said it was approximately 100 feet across, 18 feet roughly high. It appeared once they got the staircase deployed that it appeared to be 3 levels. As Dr. Thayer was saying, when Doug Nolan, they realized that there was about a quarter-size hole in one of the portholes. They were able to look in the mirrored type of portholes and look around, and they saw 2 bodies slumped over what appeared to be like bucket seats in a control panel. Once the staircase was deployed, and you got to keep in mind, I kind of jumped ahead of the story. When these young oil field workers first got there, they were not thinking that this was some type of spacecraft. They were thinking it was some type of U.S. secret bomber or something. And they were looking at it purely from a rescue mission until they got up close and were able to deploy the staircase and realize that the bodies in this craft were not humanoid as we know it.
Was there any indication where the craft and the occupants were brought to?
That's ongoing research on our part. We're actually working on a lead right now. I think originally it would have been taken to Los Alamos the way it came apart. There are a lot of facts that lead up to our guessing that. But it now appears that in 1958 the craft was located at a different base. And we're following some very good leads on that right now.
Now, I know there was supposedly 3 radar towers in the vicinity. And what about the report that a high-powered experimental radar installation that was located on a high mountain in the Four Corner area that may have interfered with the controls, thus crashing? And was it picked up on radar by other military installations?
Well, I was the one that broke the radar story back in the late 90s.
Right.
We had keep hearing about the radar bases. Steinman mentioned them in his book. Bill and Suzanne and I and Frank have become very good friends. Steinman told me what he did to research that, but he said, believe me, those radar bases are there somewhere. You just have to find them. So in January of '99, I went out with a group, a very outdoorsy group, to say the least, because we were fighting a bad snowstorm. And we did all the normal places you go. We took topographic maps and looked for all the high peaks. It would make sense to have a radar base, knowing the early radar that was available back then. That's the first place we went was Dulce, to think maybe a radar base is the grounds for all these crazy stories about, a military base at Dulce. It was there that we learned that from one of the waitresses that her girlfriend had dated a guy that worked at a radar base down at Alvado. So the short of the long story is the next day, fighting again a blizzard of a storm, we made it down to Alvado. And after searching around and following her very good directions, we did find a radar base, the remains of one. And it was first opened in 1946 as the Los Alamos Radar Facility. It was operated by the Atomic Energy Commission. And about 1950, the Atomic Energy Commission decided they didn't really need to be in the radar business. They turned it over to the Air Force, where it was the designation was the 767th Tia Maria Radar Facility. And by 53 or 52, it was designated the Alvado Radar Facility. It still had the call sign 767 AC and W. Further search, with the help of the historians down at Maxwell, we uncovered that there was one at Moriarty, which is just north and east of Albuquerque. And that came online a little bit later. And then to the west of Albuquerque was the Continental Divide. And all of them, sadly, were replaced by Dewline radar by 1957. And so the bases of Alvado lasted 46 to 57. Actually, they had two major upgrades in two different locations along that road. So yeah, I was kind of the first couple of symposiums I ever did. We went into great detail on those. They did have high-powered radar. They were testing an over-the-horizon radar called Lash Up for the Navy. Could that have been responsible? Possibly, possibly not. We have no proof. Yes, they did have a lot of UFO sightings through Freedom of Information Act. We got all the historical reports declassified. There is nothing mentioned in March of 1948 in any of the archives. As a matter of fact, they had no activity in March of 1948, according to the archives. But that's speculation that they had anything to do with the craft coming down.
Now,
let me break in here
Frank.
and mention that Scott actually got some video coverage of the Alvado site that he put into his 2004 video on Aztec 1948. And I think Scott still has a few of those videos around.
Yeah, we still do. They're still available to order. You can go on either Frank's website or the Aztec incident website, and instead of clicking to buy a book, send us a private message that you'd like a tape, and I think they're $19.95 plus shipping and handling. But yeah, that's a 56-minute long documentary on our early research on Aztec, and a good portion of that was filmed at the radar base.
Now, who were the first people on scene? Did they try to communicate with the craft by radio or other means? And when did they decide to bring in the military?
It started, actually, the whole incident. Los Alamos had seen craft for some time, several weeks before the incident actually happened, as well as Cuba, New Mexico. And on this particular, the night before, there was a police officer who had filled out many reports and had seen crafts of varieties the few weeks before, decided to follow it, as this particular one seemed to be wobbling and in trouble. He followed it up to the Four Corners area, took him all night, and just as he started to, they started to get to where it ended up landing, he lost it for a few minutes. During that time, there was a gentleman by the name of Archuleta, Valentine Archuleta, who was a prisoner, had been a prisoner of the Bataan Death March, and he witnessed it, and then he saw it actually hit and scrape a bluff on his property, Then it continued and it landed. Now the police officer shows up and he finds that there are other people there. And as Frank described, there is a police commissioner, there's a county commissioner, there's another police officer, there are oil field workers, a minister shows up, a Baptist minister, and there are ranchers out there. And that's the first people that actually have contact with it.
And Suzanne, remember too that Valentine Archuleta actually put in a long-distance call to Albuquerque to record his sighting, and that may have alerted them. If they hadn't seen it on radar, the Kirtland Air Force Base would be alerted by his phone call early in 5:30 in the morning.
That's right.
Now, there seems to be, and this is just my own personal opinion because I've done a lot of research on certain instances that's happened, whether it's here in the United States or overseas, but you had Loring Base incident in Maine in 75. You had Rendlesham. You had what happened with what Robert Salas describes as the silos being shut down at the Maelstrom base. Now, this is not far. We had Roswell. Then you have Los Alamos where they were developing the atom bomb. Do you guys think there is a connection that we see these craft over these installations, and maybe that this was one of those, again, some object that was trying to get close to the vicinity to observe what we were doing?
I'll take part of that. I know Thayer wants to jump in, and probably Suzanne. But yeah, it's pure speculation. But yeah, it does seem to have a big interest in the fact that Los Alamos, of course, the home to the Manhattan Project. When we really dug into it, we were contacted by James Hardy, who was third in command of the Atomic Energy Commission Security Force. And he contacted us about 2 years ago and said, he had first arrived in January of 1948. He arrived at Los Alamos. And he was overwhelmed with how many UFO sightings they had between the day he got there and the end of March of 1948. And he had not read our book. He had never heard Suzanne or Frank and I lecture or be on radio. His description of the craft was almost identical to the craft, the picture we have of the artist rendering we have of the craft in our book. And the fact that this object hovered 80 feet off the ground right outside the gates of Los Alamos for 15 to 20 minutes while they sat there in awe, not knowing what to do. Part of them wanted to shoot it out of the sky, and the other part of the security force said, we don't need to aggravate it. We don't even know what it is. But I was shocked at how many sightings they had up there.
All right.
So yes, to answer your question, it is intriguing that wherever we're doing things like atomic or hydrogen bombs, they definitely seem to have an interest.
Right. Let's remember, New Mexico was the epicenter of development. We had Los Alamos. We had the high-powered radar. We had the only atomic bomb wing in the world at Roswell. We had White Sands Proving Ground, where they were sending B-2 missiles into the stratosphere. There was Trinity Site, where the first bomb was exploded. I think that would have gotten their attention, don't you?
I agree. I definitely agree. I think that could have been the precedent to start this whole rash of sightings. They seen it, and they were interested to see we may have entered in a new phase of technology, and they were checking us out. I really do believe that.
All right, well, let's go to our first break, and we're going to come back with guest of the night, Frank and Suzanne Ramsey, and Dr. Frank Thayer, talking about the Aztec.
All right, so I just want to say hello to everybody in Keith Stream going on at P&K Space Imaging. Go check it out. They do great lunar streams, observations of the moon surface, getting right up in those craters. Just great visuals over there. And over here, I'm just airing some old shows that I did with Jamie. This is the Aztec UFO show with Dr. Frank Thayer and Scott and Suzanne Ramsey. And I want to say hello to everybody that's in chat. Ex-Lady Kath, Derek, Edwin, Miguel, Mauricio, and Carmen in California. Dave, Shock, Snarl, Jade. Let's see, Rockstar. Seen as Camille, I think it's going to sleep, so he's out of here. Lorraine. Let's see, who else is hanging around right now? Duplicate. Let's see. Pretty much that's what I see scrolling up, so I'll just leave it at that for now, and everybody else that's in there, hello. So we're going to continue just airing this replay of a show we did a couple of months ago, hoping that the moon will move away enough that we can see the Leonid's meteor shower later on. So hopefully that will happen and the skies stay clear. Right now the moon is, I'd say, at a 45-degree angle to my east. So it's very bright, super brilliant right now. You can see it reflecting off of my wood stove chimney. So it's really bright out there right now. And Zdenek Humpal is in the room. So hello to Humpal. And we're going to keep it going. And I hope I said Derek? Derek's also hanging out in chat. So hopefully it will stay clear and we'll get a better visual later on. It's only 10:38 Eastern time. So we've got quite a bit to go. And I think in a little while after midnight, Jello and Amanda, and I don't know if Dave's feeling up to it, or Lorraine and some others, maybe we'll get a Skype going. And we'll take it through the morning hours. So we'll see how that goes. In the meantime, I'm going to continue playing the audio of the show we did.
Bill and I are talking to...
And hello to everybody, and it's Keith Stream.
Dr. Frank Thayer about the Aztec UFO incident, and we're going to jump back into it. There was a message to General Marshall, then Secretary of State, who then called for a meeting with Joint Chiefs of Staff, President, and National Security Council. Can you talk about this a bit? I don't know who wants to take it.
I can talk a little bit about it. There's a whole lot more to that story that we ever addressed in our book. Thank you to the wonderful research of Bob Coford of California. That Steinman scratched the surface on what went on with General Marshall. And on a Sunday, right after the